All right, so once you have this file downloaded from GitHub and it's in your working directory, you can execute that cell, hit Shift Enter, and you should now have that data frame saved. So what we can do is first look at the data types, and by default it will infer the data type. So date is treated as a string because it doesn't recognize it automatically as a date time object, but the other ones will be recognized as floating point values. So again, we can use this info function to see some features. There's 66 rows with index from 0 to 65. There's 5 columns, one object, and 4 floats. And now we can start to see the usefulness of this describe function. So we can see the mean values and their standard deviation, and the min and max values. So we can see that there isn't a lot of variation in any of these variables. Now, fix that link. So we can specify, if we want, the data type when we import the file. So this read CSV command, it's the same one here. We're specifying the name of the file, but now we're also going to specify a few other things. We can specify the data type, so we're going to make every column object or string. We can also specify the index column and the header row. Now, right now we've got it set to default. So the index column is none, so it will just give a regular index. So let me do one other thing. Let's go back to this row here, and we're going to do a couple things. So this way you can see sort of what the output is. So we're going to re-execute this cell, and we saw some of this before, but you can see that by default it's giving us it's using the first row as the headers, and then it's not using any indexes. It's generating its own indexes, and these are floats, and these are these last 4 columns are all floats, and the first column is strings. When we get the info, it's the same. And describe, it's the same. So here we're doing everything is the same, except we're specifying that the data type is object for all columns, and then this index column equals none and header equals 0. These are actually the default values, so you don't see any difference in how the table is rendered, except that under the hood we can see that the data types are all objects. So these are all imported as strings rather than as numbers. So when we do describe, now we're not getting numerical information. We're getting more categorical information. It's treating these things as categories. So this, in this case, would probably not be what we wanted. We would want these things to be interpreted as numerical values rather than as strings, because we're getting, the number of unique values, the top value, I believe this would be the maximum frequency of any given value. So How you import the data is important. But we can change the data type of columns after it's imported. So, for example, we can use a list comprehension. So here we're going to change this column chlorophyll micrograms per liter. That's going to be changed to, for each element of that column, we're going to convert it to float. So this is using a list comprehension. Alternatively, we can use this function, this pandas function, to numeric. So this will take a string or an object and convert it to a numeric value. So we're going to do that with pressure in dbar. We can also use a function called apply. We'll see this more later. So we can apply this PD to numeric to these two columns, salinity and temperature, and it will convert, and then we're going to store those two as themselves. So effectively, we've now converted each of these four columns to numeric values, and it realizes that those are floating point values, they're not integers, and so it will convert those to floats. In practice, when you import a CSV file, it will determine the data type, and 9 times out of 10 it will work just fine, and you don't need to worry about converting data types, but sometimes it does matter. So we've seen head and tail before. These are sort of analogous to the Unix functions that we saw several weeks ago. But for a data frame, you can type the name of the data frame and then .head. By default, it will just print 6 rows, but if you provide a number, it will print that many rows, whatever number you put. And tail works the same way. So here we're getting the first 7 rows, and here we're getting the last 3 rows. Any questions to this point?